Russell Howcroft's my name. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to tonight's Monash University Alumni Speaker Series event. So I'd like to introduce you to our panel. We've got Alistair Clarkson here. Alistair Clarkson is the senior coach at Hawthorn Football Club. He played 134 games for North Melbourne, and of course he is a XD. We've got Brendan Gale. Go D's! Brendan Gale's the CEO of the Richmond Footy Club. He's been the CEO of the Players Association, so we might know what your next job is, mate. Hey, Brendan. You played 224 games for the Mighty Tigers. Please welcome Brendan. We have Father Bob Maguire, Honorary Monash University Fellow, social campaigner and mad Collingwood supporter. He's also a regular media commentator, as I'm sure many of you are aware. And we have Dr. Angela Williams, forensic physician with the Victorian Institute of Forensic Medicine and adjunct senior lecturer at Monash University. In 2005, Angela helped develop and deliver a program about respect for women within AFL footy clubs. Yes, welcome everyone. Now, it's great to see you all here. We've got I hope it's a really interesting topic. We've certainly, thanks to the alumni management, we've got together a terrific panel, and it's our intention to have a discussion which we hope stimulates some questions from you guys in a half hour or so. You've got the flyer in front of you. You know what the topic is. We had a meeting some months ago. We thought, well, let's do AFL because it's about to be the season proper. And let's have a discussion about the AFL's involvement with the community. And when we think about the AFL, they have done some incredible things. We think of Nicky Winmar and we think of what they've done around racism. We think of the work that they do with violence against women. We think of the work that they do on if you like, making sure that the players are as drug-free as they possibly can make them. So there's a huge amount of impact that they have on society. And there's this idea, if you like, that the AFL, the ubiquity of the AFL, the Uber AFL, the all-powerful AFL, that perhaps they've achieved as much as they can achieve and perhaps there's nowhere else for them to go. I think that's a really interesting topic for discussion because after all, the AFL, it's a suburban game played in the southern states of Australia and a little bit up north. Perhaps it is no more than that. Perhaps it sees itself slightly above its station in life. I think that's a really worthwhile discussion. I hope you guys all agree with me. Panel, are you ready?
Yes, ready.
Father Bob, are you ready to go? Well, Benny. So this is a question which gets often asked, and Angela, I'm going to ask you, Angela, and it is: this is a standard question, but I think it's okay to kick off with that. Yeah. Does the community hold AFL players and the AFL generally, if you like, to standards that are higher than what we expect of ourselves?
Well, the short answer is yes, I think. The general public do expect that elite sports people, AFL included, are good role models in society and hold them probably to standards or accept less inappropriate behaviours than you might see elsewhere. The good question would be, should we use AFL players as role models?
So, should we use AFL players as role models, Angela?
Well, role models are a very recognised part of our society, and who interviews for that position and what qualifications and qualities you have to become a role model, I'm not sure we've got that well defined as yet, but traditionally I would believe a role model is someone who displays success in what they do. The commercialisation of AFL players and elite sports people, so they earn a lot of money, there's a lot of media attention, and that automatically, if you like, pops them in that position.
Father Bob, should we? Now,
what?
What's your view? So AFL footballers...
Yeah, I'm 77, mate.
Yes, I forgot to tell everyone that.
See, because you're going to get grumpy old man comments.
Well, that's fine. We're happy with grumpy old man comments, aren't we?
They all played football down at Luley Street in Collingwood and they never got paid.
Yes.
And Jack was there and they'd come off the field and he wouldn't look at them if they'd played a bad game, and that was that.
Yeah, that's right.
It had its own ethos.
Indeed. So do you think
the club reflected the ethos of the working class,
yes,
who were the main component, like your Richmond, It was the same when they were struggle town, you know, and how to adapt the ethos of the 30s or the 40s, for God's sake, to the ethos of the 2010s is a very difficult thing.
So how do you see the AFL now and how it fits within our community?
Well, the AFL has become the religion of the Commonwealth. Apart from the fact that I'm also a Storm supporter.
Storm supporter as well as...
Yeah, as well.
Yep.
But I mean, Australia, see, last week's political fiasco reminded me that in fact Australia shouldn't really be shocked that that kind of thing goes on, because Australia is so young from the point of view of Anglo-Saxonism that in fact I don't think we know who we are. And I think it's the same with sports now. Mm-hmm. I don't think the AFL really knows that it's that important. It would drop dead if it knew how important it was in ordinary people's lives.
Yes.
See, because if you go to the footy with 110,000 people on Anzac Day, you in fact, that's the most religious that any collection of Australian people will be in 12 months.
Yep, that's right.
It will be spiritual.
Indeed.
As soon as that trumpet blows, you're going to get an extraordinarily, moment of euphoria and catharsis.
That's correct.
Everybody will enter into the football match in the spirit of that second or that moment of spiritual catharsis. So terribly important,
and everyone gets to sing together as well.
Well, sing together, but be together.
Yeah,
you see, the whole point of this bloody AFL and the television is that it's encouraged us to stay home. No, we don't want to be home. We want to be with 100,000 people at the ground.
That's right.
Because that's what's missing in these days of texting and everything else, the flesh and blood component. And that's what the players have got, because on the field, it's flesh and blood. There's no texting on the field.
No.
You,
you know what I mean?
you don't think, Bobby, that the AFL think that that's pretty important, though, the engagement with community and fans?
Yeah, they are. They talk good about it, but I've got to see the practice.
Well, I've seen the practice. The game continues to grow. I reckon clubs and the AFL engage with their community better than they ever have.
But not enough.
Yeah. Well,
Great expectations. I mean, I've been around 40 years, South Melbourne, Port Melbourne. We buried 40 kids under 20 in the 80s.
Yeah.
Now, that's disgraceful.
Yeah.
That's disgraceful.
And football does play a role in giving people...
down the Port and the South, for God's sake.
Absolutely.
You've got the South Colts, you've got the Port Colts and the South...
Now, Benny, obviously you're CEO of a footy club, but I know you're also involved with local footy. And so do you agree with Father Bob that it does... I know you're a good Catholic boy as well.
No, he doesn't have to.
No, but do you agree with Father Bob that it plays a role, it's like going to church on a Sunday?
Yeah, I think the AFL has got a very good appreciation of its importance in the community, and I think the CEO has got an extremely good appreciation for how important he is, but strike that, that's a joke. Please, but no, look, I think they do, and accordingly I think that's why there's been a willingness to go a long way in the raising standards and bringing communities together and encouraging debate about a whole range of social issues, and at some cost at times. So I don't think there's any doubt about that. But I think that the earlier point we're talking about the role model question, and I think you can debate this till the cows come home, but at the end of the day, you don't get a choice. If he's a young kid who goes to a Hawthorn game and sees Buddy Franklin and wants to be like Buddy, or Luke Hodge or Sam, I mean that's it. It's just they don't get a choice. As to whether that's fair or right, that's where the debate comes in.
Yeah, so I'm inclined to agree with you. I don't think that the players have got a choice.
Yeah.
I also think it might be fair. Angela?
I want to disagree with you with all due respect.
Go ahead.
I think maybe the players... Well, everyone. I'll just disagree with everyone today. You're right in the sense that the players may not have an individual choice on whether they're on a pedestal or not, but I think there is a role for the AFL to put forward on a continuous basis. They're good players who do remarkable things for the community and rewarding good behaviour, and I, as general public, just tend to hear about the bad things going on. Do you?
That's because the media don't want the good stories.
No one wants to know.
I agree.
That's true, isn't it?
My involvement with the AFL players, I saw a hell of a lot of guys with a very positive message to deliver, and I've never heard it publicly.
Yes.
I'd like to see that.
Well, just thinking, is there is there a Brownlow medal for community engagement by an AFL player? We don't have one of those, do we?
Good point.
Yeah.
Well, there is. There's the Players Association established the Madden Medal a few years ago, which is
which medal?
The Madden Medal.
Madden medal. Yep.
So it's like the NFL in America have what's called a Man of the Year.
Yeah.
So they define what it means to be a man. It means being giving to the community, that sort of stuff. So unfortunately, it doesn't get a lot of traction. But it's well supported, and the guys really appreciate and value it.
I go back to the physicality of this role model business.
Yep.
Unless you see them in the street and you see them around the traps, the heroes, well, then you can't empathise as much or feel as though you're a part of their aura.
Yeah.
As if you see them virtually as a hero. See, I mean, the heroes have got to be flesh and blood, and they've got to be able to be. They've got to be at at arm's length.
Yeah. So Father Bob, what you're saying is that there isn't the opportunity for the community to touch and get engaged. I don't literally mean touch.
No, and also when you're dealing with young men, I mean, it's notorious. It's well known, surely, isn't it, that the young men take so long to mature as human beings. 25 years to start us, and what we've done is create a
42.
The worship
For most people.
of 77. You know what I mean?
They got you finally, didn't they?
They had to throw me out before I woke up to myself. After 77 years. Yeah, I'm learning more now because I'm mixing with ordinary people, driving to work and all the... I think of Charlie Bronson this morning. Remember that film? What was that? Was that The Magnificent Seven?
Yeah.
When the kid comes up to Charles Bronson, the character, the gunslinger,
Yeah.
the kid says, I wish my father was like you. Do you remember that? And Charles Bronson looked at the kid and said, don't you ever talk about your father like that to me. Your father does more things for you in one day than I could have ever done in my life. Mm. And the kid was looking at and he's been taught a lesson by the role model.
Yes,
Don't
that's right.
you treat me like a hero. You see, and that's what I think, I mean, it's hard for blokes. It's hard for blokes. That's why it's so important to have women, so many women in the
So
the AFL.
Angela's telling us that a man's brain doesn't mature until it's 25.
No, I'm just saying it's not his fault. He's just going to, naturally speaking, he's behind the scratch.
Yeah. So I've got a question for Alistair, which sort of relates to sportsmen's brains. Are elite sportsmen just prone to bad behaviour, Alistair?
I think we're all prone to bad behaviour at different stages, aren't we?
Yeah.
The greatest difficulty with elite sports, women or men, is the exposure to media, and that bad behaviour then get exposed to the world. Now, probably their habits and behaviours are no worse than the general public, but because it becomes a public event, because of their role model status or their elite status as someone to look up to and someone that is elite in their field, then it gets portrayed as being, of really poor behaviour and that there's a problem. Mm. We know from the drug culture in AFL footy in terms of illicit drugs that, Benny and I who have been involved in the game and then get out into mainstream work and we start maybe going out once we finish playing footy, and some of the things that you actually see now is guys that are no longer playing football that you probably shunned an eye to when you played. Yeah. It's just like we've been in this time warp for 10 or 15 years whilst we played to actually know what mainstream society is like, particularly to do with drugs, but also alcohol, violence on the streets, all these things. Our players, from my experience in terms of elite sport, unbelievably well behaved. Mm. But when there's a muck-up, it's across the front pages of the papers, and because of the exposure and the battle in the media between 24-hour journalism, especially with like SEN coming in and always fighting for a story, and that story would be on the airwaves within 5 minutes, and people ringing in because it's talkback radio. That means everyone's fighting hard for the story, so it just gets sensationalised, and that's enormously difficult to manage. It's probably, I dare say Benny has same challenges as what I do, but probably in senior leader roles of a football club, it's probably the most significant thing that you have to try and manage as a football club.
It's quite difficult, isn't it? Because you as a footy club and the AFL needs the media. I'm
just going to pick up on that.
Go on.
It's a good segue because there's another. I'm going to go on a bit of a limb here, but I've got a bit of a theory. This is dangerous. And that I reckon because of the prominence of football, AFL football, and elite sport generally these days, and the role model issue. And I think because lifestyles are changing, I think people are working harder, they're working longer, they're seeing their kids less. Some of the institutions that used to rely on to set standards and a moral, the family is not what we once knew. Organised religion isn't what we once knew. Politicians, aren't perhaps what they once were. I don't know. But because of that, I think people look to elite sport and the AFL. And so when players or leaders fall short of... So when players fall short of these deemed standards, they whack them. People feel cheated. They feel let down. They get on talkback and say, "Oh, my little boy," and this and that. So I reckon there's a lot of there's a bit of communal type guilt happening there as well. And that's just a theory. I don't know whether it's...
Does anyone agree
whether
with,
it's valid?
With Benny?
A lot of pressures on elite sports people, and there's other things that occur when you enter the elite sports world that don't occur when you're in general public like the rest of us. You may be, this is a bit stereotypical, but you may be picked up out of school and put into club atmosphere. We all know that our social norms often come at this age group from going to work, and if you're going to work within just a male culture, then you're exposed to a different set of social norms. What I wanted to disagree with, I think, is the theme that's coming across to me about it's just the one guy and therefore it's not all of us. And whilst I agree with that, there's still an underlying acceptance somewhere that behaviour is okay, or some enabler to continuing that behaviour. And I just want you to think about the media and the last stories that you've read, especially in my field regarding physical and sexual assault of women and men and young children. It's the victims that are getting the troublesome media. It's those people who are getting called liars, that they're out just to cause difficulty for AFL players, that everything that they've said is for some secondary gain. And I think what we're not paying attention to is the person that's doing the wrong is not just the poor guy, boys will be boys. We need to be doing something about it, and we need to ensure that it's not within our culture. And you could argue that it's historically within our culture, and therefore we all have to keep working at it, that we don't create those enablers. And the simple enabler for me, and that's what the players told me many years ago, is when you're in the showers and you have a joke about something, a derogatory joke about something, it's no longer about race and it's no longer about religion, it's more about women.
These days? That surprises me.
A little while ago,
okay.
But yeah.
Alistair, you talked about the bubble, if you like, that the AFL players, so you come out, you get drafted, you're 18, 19, let's say you've got a 10-year career, you get spat out the other end. Is there a concern within the clubs, within the AFL, that bubble actually isn't setting them up for being 30, no longer an AFL player and out there?
Well, I think the difficulty is that our game has only become truly professional probably in the last decade. And so we're still evolving as a group of clubs that are trying to manage this full-time professionalism of AFL players and then their possible transition into mainstream work post their AFL careers. Now, in some cases that can be as short as 12 months or 2 years, and in other cases it can be as long as 12 to 15 years in the game. It's enormously difficult to have these guys who, in a lot of cases, haven't got the time to develop the skills that they need for mainstream work. But once they finish their football careers, but my experience, and certainly from the Hawthorn Footy Club, and indeed I think it's spread right across a lot of the clubs in the AFL now, is that clubs are working very, very well with their players in conjunction with both the AFL and the Players Association in trying to provide opportunities for these players so they can develop some skills. That's why through the collective bargaining agreement that's just been signed off between the Players Association and the AFL, that there's a mandatory compulsory day off and that there's another half day during the week that the players have also requested, so that it gives them now 1.5 days where they can be away from the club to develop some of these skills. And I'm sure if that becomes part of mainstream right across the competition, that our players will be much better prepared post their AFL careers.
So Benny, when I observe the Melbourne Footy Club, which is the one I know best, I do sometimes say to myself, Jesus, how do they fill in a full day, these footballers? I mean, are you filling in the day for them? Is it 9 to 5, apart from the 1.5 days you got off? Or really is it, are we pretending to give them 9 to 5 and reality is they're not doing that?
Well, I mean, I'm sure Al could answer that, but much better than me. But I mean, they're there from, it's basically a full-time job. They're there from 7, 8, 3 or 4. You know, they're not always out in the track training. They're doing a sort of quite a varied program, but they're there and there's meetings and there's, medical type obligations. There's obligations to sponsors and corporates. There's, developing the game community, a whole range. So it's very much a full-time job. And on top of that, they get their half or day off to go and undertake some study or traineeship. So, I mean, one of the things that amuses me is this sort of PlayStation myth that the boys sort of come and I think there's a view that they still train 2 or 3 nights a week at 4 p.m. or something, but I don't see too many PlayStations.
No.
It wouldn't be too much time, I would have thought.
And tell me, outdated PlayStations. I think, aren't we onto Wii's or iPhones?
Tell me about though, but tell me at Richmond and Hawthorn, but about just the broader education. So being derogatory to women in the shower is what's been suggested. But is there programs around respect? There's respect for women programs.
Well, there are, and that sounds, that often, I don't necessarily like that term. It sounds a bit patronising, but it's about cultural change, and it's about, we've got policy relating to, gambling and, responsible consumption of alcohol and respect and responsibility for women, their role in the workplace, and because they're in very male environments, football clubs. It's changed a lot in the last 10 years. So there's the formal education, which the coaches and clubs encourage them to get out and get involved in, but there's I was lucky enough to I've got a decent education, but I can guarantee you I learnt more in football clubs about life and human nature and
more than at Monash University.
Well, not quite, nearly. But I call it the University of Footy, and I think we often don't value the learnings and the experiences and the life skills. It's such a intense environment, and they're very rich environments.
Can I talk to you about social media, Father Bob? Now, Father Bob is a ferocious Twitterer.
I'm not doing it now.
No, but so I recommend.
Some of them are.
I recommend you follow Father Bob. You can keep tabs on his movements all day, every day. A fantastic social media advocate, Father Bob is. Now, I'd like you to advise AFL players on social media. What would your advice be, in particular to Alistair and Benny? They've got their Chargers, their Richmond Chargers, their Hawthorn Chargers. Social media, what's your point of view?
Well, cut their thumbs off. Isn't it? I mean, I notice now with baptisms of children, the baby is now born, the latest model, with a longer thumb. And somebody said, but what? I said, because the baby's ready to text.
Ready to go.
Ready to go, because we used to use our feet. Remember in the old days, any old babies there? We used to lie on the ground and used to send messages by foot. How are you? Is she coming back? All this kind of stuff. It was all done by the feet. But now it's all being done, you've got people sitting in under the... I catch Safran sometimes at the ABC. He's talking to somebody, a guest, the same time he's...
That's right.
Sending messages under the desk, What a bloody idiot this bloke is or something,
So you're...
I'm saying it's a brave new world. You know this better than I do. There's a virtual world out there.
Indeed.
You see, and people are getting lonelier and lonelier and lonelier and... Get the violin again. Yeah. Lonelier.
I wanted lonely as a cloud.
But in fact, they're spending much more emotional energy in cyberspace than they are in real space.
So, Alistair, social media, it can be risky, of course, if you're in the public eye. So, how do you advise your guys on it?
We just take their phones away from them. We did that once
I
last year.
suppose that is better than chopping their thumbs off anyway.
That caused a bit of a stir, particularly amongst the wives and partners. But we'd like to. It's difficult because we can't control the players' lives either. They need to live, and if it's part of mainstream society, then we can't be withdrawing things that's their individual choice. So we can advise them of to be very, very cautious and to be careful.
About what? Because I think for me this feels a little bit like do something and think something if you want, but just don't get caught. Because you said, I think, Russell, if I'm not putting words in your mouth, that how do you advise them about not tweeting and not twittering? But really,
no, it's a social media policy. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So the policy may well be go for your lives.
Yeah, just don't think dumb things before you write the dumb things.
Well, perhaps that might be the policy, but obviously the use of social media by the players allows the public to engage more with the players. So it's very difficult.
It's only risky behaviour if you've got a risky behaviour. You see.
However, try this one for size. If we all know there's no such thing as a secret anymore, all of us know that. So does that mean that they can have whatever thought they like and Twitter it? Because we all know that that's just the vagaries of social media. That's the new world that we're now in.
Yeah, but we have to be trained. I mean, we have to be trained in social media the same as you have to be trained in how to get on with one another socially in real life. You don't do this, you don't do this, you don't, Yes. I think we need to learn the discipline from our parents or whoever the significant others are in our lives.
Yeah.
With this new issue of social, what do you call it?
Just social media.
Yeah.
You're Twitterer. You're the Twitterer.
Yeah,
here.
People have got to help the kid to learn what to do and what not to do.
Yes. Benny, sorry. Did you want to?
No, I've got nothing to add.
You've got nothing to add.
I don't really understand.
I want to talk about betting then. Let's talk about betting.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think this to me is a really interesting change in what's going on in all sport. In fact, it's the normalisation of betting in sport. So you're watching the footy, and the odds will come up, and then you might go to in effect it's an advertorial about the odds brought to you by Sporting Bet. So Alistair, we're at 3/4 time, and you're walking out to address the players at the MCG. You look up at the score. It's Betfair says you got no chance.
I think that's been squashed now, isn't it? Not allowed to do that.
Is it?
I think so.
Is that gone now?
Gone.
But the odds on the main screen.
Thank God for that.
I don't mind betting, but once again, it's just the saturation of it. If it's just betting on, what the result of the game's going to be, no drama, because that can unfold over a long period of time. It's very, very difficult to get a player or a group of players to actually manufacture a result.
Yeah.
The problem with it is that you now bet on the first goal, so you can manufacture
that. Can be manufactured.
Too right, it can be.
Yeah.
And the blowtorch is directed straight at coaches, at players to say, well, you obviously knew that he was playing forward rather than back this week, and what's stopping you from telling your brother or your cousin or whoever that? Yep. If they just had some sort of constraints around the level and saturation of betting, then betting in footy and all sports wouldn't be so bad. But you can bet on how many no balls are going to be in an over.
Yep, that's right.
It's just ludicrous, and no wonder so many people get trapped into it because there's just extraordinary amounts of money, particularly this country as well, but particularly in countries like India and Pakistan. It's just unbelievable.
Angela, how would you control the betting then? What do you think it should be, or just you're a laissez-faire sort of dude when it comes to gambling?
Well, I've done statistics at Monash, but I have to confess that I've never really been able to understand the odds of betting or anything like that.
Yeah. Although you knew Kevin Rudd didn't stand a chance when the odds were $8.50
yes.
again.
I think from where I sit as a medical professional, any time that anyone partakes in an activity that's in a healthy way and doesn't affect their life, their career, their money, their friends, their welfare, then it can be a part of their life. But once you start to step into those territories where it affects your marriage, your finance, your home, your children, etc., then there's problems. So for me, is betting just another word for gambling, or are we dodging an issue that could be there for everybody?
So Benny, should bet companies be able to sponsor footy clubs in the AFL?
Nice one. Nice one, yeah. Should I disclose my interest here? Or, being a recipient of funds, but a very small amount, I guess. I'm like Angela. I think balance, personal responsibility. But look, I don't like the intrusiveness of going to a game where there's just big crowds and big venues and kids and families. The intrusive nature of it in your face, and that's something that's really crept in. It's certainly crept in rugby league and commentary.
Yes.
I mean, that goes to the integrity of the game itself. And I just simply, as a punter, as a parent, I don't like seeing odds flashed in my face. And Clarko's right. The AFL have. It may surprise you, but the AFL actually don't own much in the stadiums. The rights associated with stadiums are owned by stadium managers. So when people bake the AFL for $15 buckets of chips and Coke and all that sort of ridiculous stuff, it's really not their fault. Their hands are tied. Same with signage at the MCG. So, but they've negotiated an agreement where you'll see less of that this year. It's about balance, I guess.
Father Bob, have you noticed, if you like, a normalisation of gambling in society?
Oh, yes. God, yeah. But see, we can't speak the Roman Catholics because most of our churches' early days were built on alcohol and gambling. See, we were the upwardly socially... We didn't become upwardly socially mobile until the 30s or something, wasn't it? The others were in possession of real estate. The Roman Catholics came here with nothing. They had no real estate. And so you ended up... This is true, because I come from a parish 150 years old, for God's sake. We never showed a bit of form, so to speak, until we ended up with a few pubs in South Melbourne and Port Melbourne, and they started to contribute, the hoteliers. You see a little stained glass window every now and again that was paid for, and other things paid for by the local hotelier. And also the other thing was, of course, the myriad of SP bookmakers who were all over the place and who also were contributors. So, I mean, it's a cultural thing.
Well, speaking of the cultural...
I can't recommend gambling, for God's sake. I mean, but all I'm saying is historically the Aussies that started from behind scratch usually found that the only way that they could get for themselves a bit of a thrill of a bit of a sniff of the sport. It's the same with racing.
Yeah.
That's why John Wren, I think, opened, didn't he, racing and also SP bookmaking, because the poor weren't able to have access to the race courses.
Yeah.
You see?
So they had to find another way.
We forget our roots. Richmond and Collingwood and Fitzroy and God knows who else came from the working class, and North Melbourne, they all came from the working class. The D's, of course, were always the Protestants.
The mighty D's.
Weren't they? The mighty D's.
Yeah, all on map 45 of the Millways.
But I think we get a bit hard on ourselves when we expect this AFL to be, in fact, be some kind of an ethereal group of people. They're not. They've got
the differences are important, aren't they?
Very important.
Yeah.
So we've come so far, as Alistair and Brendan would say. I mean, the AFL should be proud of itself.
Yeah.
That in fact it has come so far.
I'm inclined to agree, because we're on film.
Disagree and say we've come so far, but it's taken too long.
Speaking of culture, sorry, Angela, go on.
No, there's a long way to go, but I think you're right. The AFL have had a very good start in this area. I'm yet to understand whether Cricket Victoria or Australia or soccer, etc., have taken some of those stances. I know NRL have. But it doesn't stop there. And, from where I sit, and I work in a career that's full of violence and seeing live victims of violence, children and men and women, I tend to think that this needs to start earlier. It needs to start at grassroots with anti-bullying in the schoolyard and respect for people, not necessarily just women, or needs to start young. And I think the AFL, they probably acknowledge this, have a really great role. I mean, Brennan, if I can use you as an example because you're here, but you're not someone who needs a policy not to Twitter about shagging someone on the weekend because you don't think that. So hopefully, But you see, if we can start by using healthy role models and teaching young people respect and behaviours and anti-bullying, that's where we need to go.
And I think you'll find that a lot of the footy clubs are doing a lot of community work around anti-bullying and cyber-bullying. There's a lot of work going on there. I want to talk about booze, Alistair, alcohol and AFL. Obviously, the tradition, alcohol, beers, getting stuck in after a match or at the end of the season, that's deep in the culture of footy. My sense is that that's becoming less and less the case.
I think it's deep in the culture of rugby league, and that's still having trouble trying to. That code is still having trouble trying to eradicate itself from that culture. I think it's less so with AFL footy now, certainly, and it's changed. Benny and I obviously played in the same era. I can't believe the development we've made in that area in the last 10 or 15 years. Now that's gone hand in hand with the professionalism of the game, the greater demands of the game. Players just can't. They just physically they can't play the game to the same level if they've been influenced on a regular basis by alcohol. But alcohol is a scourge of our societies. Once again, it's is it in football clubs? It goes back to what Angela said about whether it's to do with talking about gambling, or whether it's to do with alcohol, or whether it's to do with the way that we treat people. It really comes down to the core of our education system and how early are we taught some of these things, and how do we address some of these things about bullying in the playground amongst 6, 7, 8-year-old kids. I mean, if we've got a really strong and powerful education system that's where the significant role models are for mine, and a really strong environment and strong respect for the family. Once again, that's dissipated over time as well, and we wonder why these things happen in society. And as Benny said before, because all these things have eroded over time, we're still searching for these people in society that can actually provide us with some sort of standard. Yep. And it's just like, AFL footy is the most portrayed game and the most popular game in Australia. It continues to expand. We've now got 18 teams. We've got over 800 players, and it's just like, he's going to be my role model. And really, the role model should probably be his dad or his older brother. Yeah. But that's been eroded over time now. Yeah. But I think our whole standards as a society have dropped.
But Alistair, I'd argue that the aspirational nature of AFL, of the AFL player, of the AFL club, and the increasingly strong values of AFL clubs, I think that they do provide aspiration for the father that wants to be a good father. I think that my view is the AFL has become so strong and genuinely has got the strength of character and the strength of conviction to do lots of great things. I really believe that, and I think that the clubs and the organisation itself is pursuing those. I think they're genuine when they pursue, the drugs policy, alcohol policy, discrimination policies. I think that they're absolutely genuine when they attack these issues. The issue for me is you attack it, you do a campaign, and then you might move on to the next one thinking that you've done that one. Yeah, where in fact these things are just perpetual. You shouldn't stop. Yeah,
ongoing.
Yeah. Now we're going to do questions. Please. Hello, sir.
Thank you. If I could ask a question to the panel, and maybe to Alistair in particular. You've talked a lot about the problems with the journalists, media, social contacts. Well, what about the other side of it? Isn't there some wrongdoing or criticism that should be directed to the media that, in effect, beat up some of these issues completely out of proportion to what they perhaps deserve?
We've got no control over it. We try as best we can to manage things that we can control, and so because there's so much media out there that want to leverage off the exposure of AFL football, then we've got extraordinary demands from print media, airwaves and television, and the management of that is extraordinarily difficult. And we feel that the print media have got a responsibility too in terms of the exposure that they give to the game. But we've got no control over editorials.
No.
And so we've just got to try and manage what we can control.
So you can control your website and your social interactions. Benny?
Yeah, look, we're all great beneficiaries of media support, and as footy fans, we watch it and listen to it, and they invest a lot in the game. But I think that the test of the great editorial test, you decide whether to publish or not, or whether something's in the public interest. And so I think the trouble is we've moved the test to sort of what the public might be interested in, and they're worlds apart. And so that's the landscape we're in. They're worlds apart, and we all understand the landscape changes, and that's just the way it is. But it's just the willingness to push into that real private space and feed that salacious type. That's where it's getting really nasty and concerning.
I think you're right. When anything invades someone's private world, that's very difficult. But I just sort of disagree a little bit with the theme that it's a real poor me to be a role model. I think that in today's day and age is such a privilege, and some place you could really exact some change and some influence, especially on young people. And so I'd like to see people really kind of rejoice that they're suddenly a role model, acknowledging that it would be very, very difficult, I agree, to have people.
I have to say, Angela, I completely agree with you. Yes, we have another question. We might, just a couple more. Yeah.
I look around the audience tonight and there's quite a few females here. If this was a meeting of people in senior positions from the AFL and the clubs, I suspect there'd be quite a few less. Is there a cultural need for more women in senior position in the AFL and the clubs?
Look, if I wanted to be a bit of a commo just for 5 seconds...
Go for it.
I'd be looking forward to the time when you have an Occupy AFL movement.
Yeah.
When you got the 99%, in fact, calling the 1% to answer.
Yep.
Why is it that a woman with 3 children who wants to go to the footy and show these kids a bit of a thrill, the only thrill they're going to have in the whole week, and she can't afford to go into the ground?
Yes.
See, why is it that we've got this aura of these people living on top of Mount Olympus? They're being paid how much?
Fair bit.
A lot of money, and he can't kick the goal.
Well, that's.
I mean, the arguments that are going on in the stands and in the bleachers are, in fact, as you said, ma'am, far different from the discussion, intellectual discussion that we'd be having. I think you've got to get closer to those grassroots. I honestly do, and they deserve it. The grassroots deserve one place in their lives where they can go and, in fact, everybody's an expert. Mm-hmm. There's no expert standing over them saying, no, we can't run the show this way. Everybody's an expert in footy.
That's one of the great things about it.
And that's the one time in a democracy when that feeling, it's a feeling. I think we need more feeling in AFL than thinking.
Which perhaps leads back to the question that we might need more women involved in the clubs,
well,
Benny.
blokes are thinking more now than ever, feeling more now than ever.
Yes,
See?
That's
feeling
true.
What?
Benny?
Look, the short answer is absolutely yes. I think it'd be terrific.
Totally.
I think good decisions are made by people who come together in diverse backgrounds, and I think that's great for any workplace.
Agreed.
So I couldn't agree more strongly. Whether the observation's actually true, I don't think senior levels of football clubs are that out of step with senior levels of professional services firms or law firms or accounting. I don't think it's that out of step.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I was speaking to the head of the Navy a couple of years ago, who said to me the best thing that's happened to the Navy is the increased amount of women involved. I think it's up to 35% now. Massive change in culture. All for the better, as you would imagine. They're desperately keen to get it up to 50-50, which obviously was for centuries a male domain. And you would think and you would hope that one day there'll be a female CEO of a footy club. Why not? I don't think anyone would say that's silly, would they? We have a question to the left. Hi.
Hi, question for Brendan, but really for the panel if anyone else wants to answer. And going back to social media, Alistair, you, just stemming from Alistair's earlier comment, mentioned that it's really, social media is maybe not, it's something that's generally out there in the community, so you can't really prohibit your players from participating or twittering, being on Facebook. Brendan, what are your thoughts on that in relation to sponsors? Like if you have a club sponsor, do you then say to your players, these are the things you can and can't say? Because the repercussions come back to the club. It's not dissimilar to Kyle and Jackie O and Austereo being penalised for Kyle's behaviour and advertisers dropping out.
Yeah, look, I didn't want to dismiss social. I don't subscribe to it myself. I don't really understand it, but our media people do. Our commercial people know the power of it to sort of communicate, and so look, our players, they don't hide things, but they know right from wrong, and I guess they're trained on, there's a lot of sort of IP in football clubs. There's a lot of sort of secrets, and you like to keep things in house about the way you do. So sometimes guys are a bit loose, but certainly it's really important they reflect the values of the club and the values of those who support and invest in the club. And I mean, a lot of time and effort goes into educating them about what is right from wrong and making sure they're informed. So I didn't want to sound flippant before.
We'll have one more question here.
We've talked a lot about the game tonight, and I think for me it comes down to the AFL and the clubs themselves as two, not separate, but different responsibilities.
Yes.
So the AFL seems to be doing a lot to amongst all of these issues. So they've got, Auskick, and they run fantastic advertising campaigns that tell us that the AFL is all about excitement and enjoyment. And it always feels like you've got the clubs letting it down. Do you feel that the clubs do more than the minimum required, or do you think they go beyond that?
Listen, I think the AFL clubs have been first class, and the AFL too. They've been pioneers in so many things in world sport, and I look at in our particular case with our club. The great difficulty of what's happened with AFL clubs in the last 20 years as it's become professional, our game actually grew where it was quite tribal. Collingwood versus Richmond, and if you played for Collingwood, you probably grew up in Collingwood, and if you played for Richmond, you grew up in Richmond. Our competition in the last 20 years is. Then they said, not only will you have players coming from Collingwood, but you'll also have a zone in Victoria where you can draw players from, which for Collingwood was down around Hamilton and Ararat and that sort of area. And where I grew up in a little place called Conniva, that was Essendon zone. And but the game changed enormously, and what became very, very difficult was there was no longer reason for the Collingwood Footy Club or Essendon for that matter to go to Horsham or Conniva, where I grew up, to invest in the game, because they knew that they couldn't get players from that area just when they wanted to. They could invest as much time as they liked into that area, but another club could pick up that player through the draft. So what has evolved over the last 10 or 20 years is this responsibility by the AFL and the clubs to try and stretch to all of Australia. And indeed, now we're going to New Zealand, we're trying to go into South Africa, Benny's going to take his crew to India. We're going all around the world to try and draw in supporters and players. It's an enormous responsibility for football clubs. I think they do it as well as they possibly can. Now, some of it is for reasons of expanding so that we can have a greater interest in the game and more money coming into the game. But some of it is just taking the game to as far as we can in terms of to be a good influence on young people. I only look at our footy club and the AFL's role in the Indigenous. And our footy club, until the last 10 or 20 years, had very, very few Aboriginal players in the club. For 80 or 90 years, they had this view that, for whatever reason, that Aboriginals weren't going to be part of the Hawthorn Footy Club. The Mighty Pies had exactly the same. I'm proud now to say that the Hawthorn Footy Club is probably the leading club in the AFL in terms of giving Indigenous players an opportunity.
Yeah.
But we've had to evolve in a very, very difficult circumstance, as I said, from that tribal where everything was just on your doorstep, to then having zones and then having them abolished, and now our responsibility as a code and as clubs was to now expand to all of Australia. It's been enormously difficult, but I think with the help of the AFL and their direction and their responsibility to throw a lot of money behind it, we've made some real gains in that area. But like we've said, we've still got a long way to go in some of those areas, but we're certainly on track, and I think we're the leader probably of all sports in the country.
Please thank Father Bob, Benny, Angela, Alistair Clarkson.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.